Imagine a world where one man's act of desperation ignites a flame that spreads across nations. This was the world of Mohamed Bouazizi, a Tunisian street vendor. Frustrated by economic hardship and political indifference, he set himself on fire in a public act of protest. His tragic event reverberated through Tunisia, awakening a collective outcry against injustice and inequality. This single event was the spark that ignited the Arab Spring. From Tunisia, a wave of protests began to sweep across the Middle East. A surge of collective discontent, a quest for freedom and change ignited in the heart of the Arab world. Let's travel to Egypt, where the echoes of Tunisian dissent resonated. January 25, 2011, thousands of Egyptians flooded the streets, calling for an end to Hosni Mubarak's 30-year rule. This was not just a protest, it was a revolution. The people's resilience was rewarded. Mubarak stepped down, marking a significant victory in the fight for democracy. Onward to Libya, where the winds of change blew fiercely. February 17, 2011, sparked the beginning of a brutal civil war. The people, once silenced, rose against Muammar Gaddafi's four-decade regime. Despite the heavy cost of the uprising, the Libyan people persevered. Their determination culminated in the fall of Gaddafi, a testament to their unyielding spirit. In Yemen, the wave of protests crashed with a force that shook the nation. January 27, 2011, a youthful crowd filled the streets of Sana'a, demanding the resignation of President Ali Abdullah Saleh. The struggle was long and fraught with difficulty, yet the voice of the Yemeni people remained strong. Saleh finally relinquished power, marking the end of his three-decade reign. Lastly, Syria. The wave hit hard here, triggering a civil war that continues to this day. March 15, 2011, peaceful protests erupted, calling for President Bashar al-Assad's resignation. The government's violent response ignited a conflict that has since claimed hundreds of thousands of lives. Yet, the Syrian people's call for change continues to echo. These protests, these revolutions, were as diverse as the nations they occurred in. Yet, they shared a common thread: the indomitable will of the people. Each cry for freedom, each demand for change was a testament to the human spirit's resilience. In the face of adversity, the people had spoken, but how did the world react? The global response was as varied as the protests themselves, a fascinating interplay of power, politics, and the human quest for freedom. But that's a tale for another time. In this digital age, a revolution was not just fought on the streets, but also on screens. Just as the printing press played a pivotal role in the revolutions of the past, social media became the catalyst for change during the Arab Spring. It was the 21st century's weapon of choice, a tool that amplified the voices of those who crave change, uniting them in their quest for freedom. Facebook and Twitter became virtual town squares, where ideas could be exchanged, plans could be made, and people could be mobilized. The power of a tweet, the influence of a Facebook post, these were the new tools of resistance. By sharing images and videos, activists were able to expose the harsh realities of oppression, rallying their fellow citizens and capturing the world's attention. But it wasn't just about organizing protests or disseminating information. Social media also served as a beacon, drawing the gaze of international audiences towards the events unfolding in the Middle East. It was through these platforms that the world became an eyewitness to the struggles and triumphs of the Arab Spring, making it a global conversation. In the face of censorship and media blackouts, social media became the people's news outlet. It was a place where citizen journalists could report on the ground realities, bypassing traditional media gatekeepers. It was a platform where every voice mattered, where every story could be told. However, this digital revolution was not without its perils. As the power of social media became evident, so did its potential for surveillance and repression. Governments started to understand that control of information was as crucial as control of the streets. Internet shutdowns, surveillance, and online censorship became common tactics to stifle dissent. But despite these challenges, the digital warriors of the Arab Spring persisted, because they understood that in this new age of communication, silence was not an option. They knew that their posts, their tweets, their videos were not just messages in the digital ether. They were the echoes of a revolution. Social media had given the revolution a voice, but it also attracted attention from those in power. As the world watched, governments scrambled to respond. As the tide of protests swelled across the Middle East, the reactions of the governing bodies varied widely. Yet a common thread was the desperate attempt to maintain control. In Egypt, Hosni Mubarak's government initially tried to placate the people, promising economic reforms. However, as the protests continued to surge, the government resorted to harsher measures, deploying police and military forces to suppress the dissent. This approach was echoed across many nations where the Arab Spring had taken root. Governments sought to strangle the protests through a show of force, often leading to violent clashes and a tragic loss of life. The control of information became a critical battleground. In Libya, Gaddafi's regime tried to suppress the flow of information by shutting down internet services and blocking foreign media. This tactic was mirrored in Syria, where the Assad regime went a step further, punishing those who dared to speak out with brutal force. In Bahrain and Yemen, governments responded with a mixture of concessions and repression. In Bahrain, the monarchy promised a national dialogue while simultaneously cracking down on protests. In Yemen, President Ali Abdullah Saleh offered not to extend his presidency, but his forces continued to clash with protesters. In Saudi Arabia, a different approach was taken. The government launched a massive public spending program aimed at staving off discontent. This approach, backed by the nation's substantial oil wealth, managed to keep the protests at bay, demonstrating the power of economic influence. As we examine these responses, it becomes evident that the governments were driven by a common goal: to maintain their grip on power. They used a combination of strategies, from force and fear to promises of reform and economic incentives. However, these efforts were largely in vain as the momentum of the Arab Spring was unstoppable. The response was swift, but the impact of these events had already made its mark. The Arab Spring had unleashed a wave of change that would reshape the Middle East, proving that the desire for freedom and dignity could not be easily quelled. The Arab Spring did not just change the Middle East, it changed the world. The reverberations of this seismic shift were felt far beyond the borders of the nations directly involved. The aftermath of the Arab Spring was a tumultuous period of political realignments, evolving conflicts, and an ongoing struggle for democracy that continues to this day. On the local scale, the Arab Spring led to a complete overhaul of the political landscape. In countries like Tunisia and Egypt, long-standing autocratic regimes were overthrown and replaced with democratic systems. However, the path to democracy was not straightforward. Several nations found themselves embroiled in protracted conflicts and civil wars, with Libya and Syria standing as stark examples of the challenges that come with such radical change. The Arab Spring also triggered significant shifts on a global scale. It sent a clear message to the world that the quest for freedom and democracy is universal. It inspired protests and movements in other parts of the world, from the Occupy Wall Street movement in the United States to the Indignados movement in Spain. It underscored the power of the people when they unite for a common cause, a lesson that continues to resonate globally. But the global impact of the Arab Spring was not limited to inspiring movements. It also sparked a geopolitical realignment. Countries were forced to reassess their relationships with the Middle East, adjusting their strategies and policies to accommodate the new political realities. Yet, despite the significant changes, the struggle for democracy continues. The Arab Spring showed us that change is possible, but it also highlighted the obstacles that lie in the path to true democracy. The push for freedom, for human rights, for a voice, it's a struggle that is far from over. The Arab Spring had left a lasting legacy. But what does it mean for the future? This question remains as pertinent today as it was when the first protests broke out. As we reflect on the Arab Spring, we are reminded that the fight for change is never easy, but it's a fight worth having. The Arab Spring was a powerful testament to the human spirit's quest for freedom and change. As we reflect on this pivotal moment in history, we must also consider its potential future implications. The Arab Spring sparked a flame that continues to burn, illuminating the ongoing struggles for democracy and human rights in the Middle East and beyond. The political landscape remains uncertain, a complex tapestry woven with threads of hope, defiance, and the relentless pursuit of dignity. The revolutions of the Arab Spring were not the end, but rather a beginning of a journey towards change, a journey that is far from over. The tides of revolution have ebbed, but the underlying currents of discontent and the thirst for justice continue to surge, shaping the contours of the future. In the wake of the Arab Spring, we have seen transformations, upheavals, and the birth of new narratives, but we have also seen resilience, unity, and the indomitable spirit of people who refuse to be silenced. The course of history is not a straight line, but a winding path filled with twists and turns. The Arab Spring has etched a significant bend in this path, propelling the Middle East onto a new trajectory. Where this path leads, only time will tell. As we look towards the future, one question remains: what will be the next chapter in the quest for freedom and change?